Many of you know Sandra Campbell is my partner in ministry here, and today we're going to have a conversation about something that I think is very important. Do you need a microphone?
Somewhere.
Okay.
You need
And
this.
I think when we get this principle on understanding, it is truly the cure for most of our anger, most of our resentment, most of our regrets, most of the hurt that we experience in our relationships, because understanding is everything. Solomon was supposed to be the wisest person who ever lived, and when he became a king of Israel, God came to him in a dream, and he said, King Solomon, I'll give you whatever you want. And he said, above all else, give me understanding. He went on to write in Proverbs that understanding's more valuable than silver, and it'll provide more good than gold, because it is everything. When we're irritated with a person, or we feel hurt because of what a person did, it's not understanding what made them do that creates the hurt. We oftentimes take that blame on ourselves. Now, to illustrate this, I'm going to give you a short story, and it took place many, many years ago in China. And a man got on a train in a small village, and it was obvious that he was intoxicated, very belligerent, very loud. Anybody that would look at him, he would curse at them and give all sorts of intimidating remarks. Well, as the train went on, the people began to complain. And the guy would march up and down the center aisle of the train, continuing to rant and rave about everything until the conductor came and said he was going to have to move him off the train. Well, he pushed the conductor away, and he continued to walk up and down, swearing. Finally, one little lady came up to him, and she says, tell me what's wrong. And the guy looked at the little lady, and he started crying. And he said, I got notice yesterday that my wife and my only son had been killed in an accident, and I'm on the way home to bury them. Immediately, everybody on the train switched from rejection and repulsion to compassion, understanding why he was acting the way he was acting. And primarily on the spiritual path, that is our responsibility when we run into somebody that hurts our feelings. There's two questions. Why would that hurt me? And why would that person do that? And usually we look at the surface, we look at the words, and we look at the actions, but we don't understand what's behind that. And a lot of people that were abused as children or were raised in a very negative environment grow up to be that way themselves. But we don't understand that. We just take that responsibility on as it must be me. Sandra, do you understand what I'm talking about with this?
I do, and I'm glad you quoted Solomon in Proverbs, because when I was in the 7th grade and being inducted into the National Junior High School Honor Society, our teacher, Mrs. Williams, had each of us recite a Bible verse. I didn't understand the meaning of that verse, but it stayed with me all these years. Get wisdom, but with all thy getting, get understanding. So you can be very knowledgeable about a lot of things. You could have read encyclopedias from front to back. You could be a Google queen or whatever, Google king. You could, if you don't know it, you know where to look it up. You can have all kinds of knowledge, but wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing. And some people who are wise are not necessarily educated in the terms that we consider education. My mother is one of those, and she's 97. She's one of the wisest people I know, and she is forever giving me wisdom. For example, one of the things she will say if someone does something or says something that is out of the way or, maybe unkind, she'll say, God bless him. And that's the extent of her comment. And she means that. That's understanding. Mm-hmm. She understands that that person may be having a difficult time, or they're going through something, or maybe they lack wisdom and understanding. So she doesn't criticize or judge. She just says, God bless him. I try, but it doesn't always work that way for me. And the story you told reminds me of a story that's similar about a little boy who was throwing bricks at cars and rocks, anything he could pick up. And finally, one of his rocks crashed into the windshield of a brand new Mercedes. And the driver got out of the Mercedes and began to chastise the little boy. And he said, do you realize how much it's going to cost to fix this car? Where are your parents? Do you know what you just did? You know, you could go to jail for this, and just really terrorizing this kid. And the kid kept yanking on the man's sleeve saying, Mister, but Mister. And finally the man said, what? He said, my little brother is in a wheelchair, and I accidentally rolled him off the curb, and I can't pick him up. And I've been throwing rocks at cars for quite some time, and you're the first person to get out and stop. It changed his whole attitude toward this little thug he thought he was talking to. And he became more compassionate. I think that's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely right. It's not a coincidence this came up on Mother's Day. My mother was a somewhat severe alcoholic, and she wasn't a mean drunk, but she was far removed emotionally. And myself, my 3 siblings, we grew up with this condition in our house. And that was a big secret. You know, everybody thought that families were like Leave It to Beaver or Father Knows Best. But then when you walk in the doors of our house, there was this huge dynamic of a drunken mother. There was an embarrassment. And I grew up having to fight for her in the playground because kids were making fun of her. And at the same time, wishing that I had the love that she could give me, and thinking that it was my fault. And that continued on until I got into seminary. And it was, I don't understand why she drinks the way she does. I do understand that she's never yelled at me, she's never hit me, she's never said a negative thing to me, but she drinks, and I don't know why. And in that moment, I was able to forgive her and forgive myself, because whatever it was in her life that made her take that particular path is something I still don't understand today, but it's okay. It was her path, and it's just something that she had to do. And one other thing, which was an incredible transformation that I experienced about 3 weeks ago, I did a funeral for a fellow, and he had 6 children. And the divorced wife, they all showed up, and we talked about him and his life. And all the children agreed that he was very removed. He wasn't a particularly good father. He didn't take an interest in the kids. And he would be very snappy, and he'd be ornery, and he would not fulfill what most people thought as his fatherly duties. And his wife said that when he left her after 35 years of marriage, she was relieved, because that 35 years of marriage had been filled with a lot of feelings on her part that really hurt her deeply. So at the funeral, they did a slideshow at the end, and the very last part of the slideshow was him giving a talk someplace that had been recorded. And I don't know if it was for an Al-Anon talk or whatever it might be, but in that talk he said that he was very much fond of the Catholic Church when he was growing up, and he was an altar boy. And there's this one particular priest that was a big brother and really treated him wonderfully, but then the priest sexually abused him. And he is so hurt by that that he never went back to church. And then he said when he got a little older in junior high school, the same thing happened with a coach who he became very fond of, and the coach sexually abused him. And he said as a result, he grew up not trusting anybody, not showing his emotions to anybody, not venturing out there because he is so afraid that he's going to get hurt again, that he just kept to himself, and he let that just simmer inside him. Well, when the kids came to understand that there was a reason why he was the father that he was, and why they didn't get the love and the attention that they wanted, was simply because there was something that happened to him that broke the capacity for him to do that. And I believe it's that way with all the people we run into that we reject, that we condemn, that we have big issues with. And there's something we don't understand about them that makes them that way. And sometimes it's even generational. It goes back to the childhood they had, and then their parents' childhood that they had. But there's a reason for it. Now, this doesn't suggest that we should stay in any sort of abusive situation, or that we should live under conditions that are intolerable. But understanding what the person's going through allows us to forgive them and allows us to extend some sort of love for them. We take exception for the deed that they did or that they do, but we still love the person that is has the Christ within them.
What you're talking about is unconditional love. It's not love based on if a person does this or doesn't do that. It's loving that person as they are, despite all of their frailties. I was thinking about, as you were talking, how we can easily judge someone if we don't understand where they're coming from. I love movies, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen The Blind Side, about the football player Michael Orr. And you know his story, where he was pretty much homeless, and people had pretty much written him off as learning disabled, and he was very poor. But a young couple, the Tui family, I believe her name's Jean Tui, in Mississippi, where he lived, she recognized him. Her son, their son, young son, kind of liked Michael. His big guy, bigger than the rest of his classmates, and made fun of. And because she had the compassion to look beyond the appearance, everyone else was judging by appearances. She looked in his heart, and she saw something in him that was so miraculous. One scene was the family was watching the football game, and it was Thanksgiving, and they had invited him over. He had social graces that they didn't have. He's sitting at the dining room table. They're all in front of the TV, like we often do, yelling at the football game and scarfing up their food. And he's sitting at the table, placing his napkin out, and folds his hands, says his grace. And the mother notices that. Next thing you know, all of them get up and go to the table. Mm-hmm. So you never know, what is this person here to teach me? And that was the lesson. Every experience has a lesson in it. That's why we're in the experience. If it wasn't a lesson to be learned for us, we wouldn't be in that experience. Your lesson learned from your mother brought you to where you are today. Thank God for your mother, because you're the minister you are because of that, because of your mother. And I know she's cheering you on from the other side. So, that we have to look at all of our experiences as gifts. Something that's here to teach us something, how to be better. In the Metaphysical Bible Interpretation class this morning, we studied the pearl of great price from the 13th chapter of Matthew. And in the scripture, it's, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. And what this is talking about, what is the pearl of great price? Can you buy it? No. It's your own life experience. What we go through provides us the pearl of great price. We're always seeking things. We want more shoes. I know I'm known for my shoes, but I know that I'm seeking something much more than shoes. I may be hungry and not really hungry. I know I'm seeking something more spiritual. And that's the pearl of great price, is wisdom. It goes back to that proverb, get wisdom, but with all thy getting, get understanding. And so that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, the primary principle, the foundational principle of unity is there's one power and one presence in the universe. And that means that there's one thing behind this whole dynamic that we call life. We refer to as God, we refer to it as spiritual energy, as divine spirit, whatever it might be. And that means that we are all alike when it gets right down to the essence of our being. And that being said, we all have the same basic 7 needs that have been defined by various psychologists of great brilliance. When those needs are fulfilled, we have a sense of well-being. When they're not fulfilled, we are in a condition that is not well, and we'll do anything that we can to get that need fulfilled. Now, along with that, the 7 needs, there are 30 motivations. And that is things that motivate us to do what we have to do to fill that need. The first need is that we need water, we need food, we need shelter. It's physiological needs. The motivation behind that is to get food or to get water somehow, some way. Some people work, some people steal. But that is the motivation to fill that need. Now, when I say 30 motivations, it expands much more into that. And we have the motivation to feel good about ourselves and to be respected. And some people do that by making great accomplishments, by being a kind person, by reaching out to other people that are in need, and other people demand it. They are bullies of sort, and they cause people to respect them in an artificial way. And so it is with the rest of the needs. When we see somebody that is tormented or somebody that is very irascible or not being a kind person, we know that they need something. And this is the way, this is the motivation that they have within them, that they've either been taught or it's been displayed to them. And this is the motivation that they use to get that. When we understand that behind their meanness, there is a reason, once again, we're able to forgive them, remove ourselves from their presence if that need be necessary, but to allow them to be blessed from afar by our prayers.
You know, Scripture tells us when Peter asked Jesus, how many times shall I forgive someone who does something against me? 7 times? And Jesus' response was no, 70 times 7, meaning indefinitely. So sometimes, you know, we live past our parents. We outlive our parents, and we think about all the things that weren't done rightly or that they didn't do. When I'm talking to people about some of their parenting experiences as children, where their mother may not have been the mother that the neighbor's mother was, or their father may not have been the father. My father was similar to Duke's mom, that I would see other children's fathers being, I wanted my father to be like their dads, and I was a little jealous. But we have to understand, as you said, we can only teach what we know. Our parents can only teach what we know, what they know. So if you are harboring any feelings towards your parents, whether they're still on this side or they've crossed over, now's the time to forgive that within yourself, because they only did the best they could with what they knew how to do. Maya Angelou, was a great poet, a great speaker, and a great writer. And I remember one thing that she said. One time she was sitting about the second row here, and she was speaking that evening here at the temple. She says, when you get, give. When you learn, teach. When you know better, you do better. That's our responsibility. If we didn't like the way we were taught or treated, we can do better. Each generation builds on the foundation of the previous generation, and none of us is perfect. So forgiving whatever you might be holding on to. We may not have had the best of the parents we thought we should have had, but they were our teachers. And we are who we are because of whatever we learned from that experience, and maybe we're still learning.
Thank you. And with that being said, I think we'll move into meditation. If there is something that you're holding on to, and you might have been holding on to it for a long time, allow this to be the time to release. And just understand that you're a perfect presence of divine spirit, and that life is what it is, and we're vehicles to make it better. We'll now move into meditation.